Lord Shadow finally met his match. This man seems weak, but with just his words, he convinces everyone that he's the strongest in the world. Klein and his 5 childhood friends became treasure hunters and formed a team. Despite being the weakest, they insisted on him being the leader. Treasure hunters explore treasures scattered around the world, facing various artifacts and monsters named phantoms. Today, a famous battle group from the capital called the Initial Footprints is holding a recruitment interview at a tavern. Essentially, a mutual aid group. Many lone adventurers showed up. Klein queued up too, behind an enthusiastic girl named Luda, newly ranked level 3. Klein ignored her handshake and just shared his name. She expressed a desire to explore the newly discovered White Wolf's den, but was mocked by an older man for her low level. A fight almost broke out but was prevented by the group members. Inside the tavern, Luda was overwhelmed by the scale of the event. But for Klein, it was his 5th time. He was familiar with the teams, like the Holy Spirit's Prince, the strongest team recruiting today, having cleared a level 7 dungeon with just 6 members. Their leader, Yak, was among the elite. Luda noticed an unattended recruitment point. Before Klein could explain, the same man approached and told her that it was the recruitment spot for the Sigh of the Dead, the top team that founded the Initial Footprints, apparently uninterested in new members. Hunters like Gilbert, a level 4, were upset. When he voiced his frustrations, he was harshly reprimanded by Tino, a devoted follower of the Sigh of the Dead, who claimed he was the only one worthy to join. Ignoring attempts to stop him, Tino insisted on fighting Gilbert. The other hunters cleared the space, eager for a show. Klein, uninterested in the drama, tried to leave quietly with Luda, but was noticed by Tino, who lunged at him with a high kick, calling him master. Yak then revealed Klein's identity as the leader of both the Initial Footprints and the Sigh of the Dead. Forced to return to his seat, Klein didn't actually have the strength for this position. Years ago, he and his friends quickly conquered many beginner dungeons, not due to Klein but because his friends were extraordinarily capable, imagining Klein as bait for phantoms, while he was completely unaware of any danger. Realizing the vast difference in strength between himself and his friends, Klein decided to leave the team. However, none of his 5 friends listened. Instead, they supported him to become the team's leader. Klein's strong speaking skills and ability to persuade made him the leader, and he later became the leader of a battle group. Surprisingly, when he spoke the truth, no one believed him. Like today, when he overslept and missed the interview, Yak thought he was joking, trying to hide his identity and secretly evaluate the participants. Klein was speechless. Beside him, the noisy, beautiful girl Tino, a member of the Initial Footprints hunting team, and one of his childhood friends, watched as Yaka asked Klein if he had any preferred candidates. Klein cleverly asked Yak if he would accept his choice, to which Yak immediately trusted Klein's judgment, saying they would welcome anyone he recommended. Tino awkwardly stated that even if Klein chose her, she had already decided to only follow her master. Meanwhile, Gilbert boasted loudly, though he secretly wanted to join and expected Klein to beg him. Klein was indeed interested in the young man, but knew he lacked the ability to judge people. His choices were purely based on luck. Therefore, he recommended Gilbert to Yake under one condition. Gilbert had to demonstrate his unbeatable strength. Klein also boasted, claiming he had never lost since becoming a hunter, though he had never actually fought. Klein took off a treasure ring from his hand and announced that whomever could get the ring, he would recommend to the Holy Spirit's Prince. After flicking the ring into the air, Gilbert tried to catch it, but was kicked away by Tino as others joined the fray for the ring. Klein used this chaos to escape back to the battle group's headquarters. The next day, news about him topped the front page after the tavern exploded during the fight, fortunately without injuring anyone. The Explorers Association summoned Klein, but he tried to delegate this troublesome matter to Yaka. However, they insisted on Klein's presence. Being a famous figure in the capital, he usually wore a disguise mask, but it was broken recently, forcing him to show his face. Upon arriving at the association, he bowed to the branch manager and talked his way out of trouble, leaving the manager too embarrassed to scold him. Despite the Initial Footprints being a top-tier battle group expected to set an example for other treasure hunters, the simple ending was unsatisfactory. So, the manager set up a punishment game for Klein. The Explorers Association provides difficult, low-reward, short-duration commissions known humorously among hunters as punishment games. Realizing he couldn't escape, Klein arrogantly sat down on the sofa and began bargaining. He agreed to take on one mission, but chose the easiest one: rescuing victims at a level 3 treasure site. Unbeknownst to him, after he left, the branch manager and his assistant lamented that he had actually picked the most challenging commission. After returning to headquarters, Klein wanted to delegate the troublesome task to Yak, but Yak wasn't in the battle group. Tino had ended up with the ring, so Klein simply handed the task to her. To his surprise, Tino tried to run away as soon as she heard, leading Klein to tie her up. She argued that she was only level 4 and rescuing 5 people alone was too much. Feeling a bit guilty for overburdening Tino, Klein arranged for 3 teammates to assist her, who had spoken with him on the day of the interview. Klein's childhood friends were all highly skilled and arrogant. Upon arriving in the capital, they went straight to the Explorers Association. Luke kicked open the door and immediately asked who the strongest swordsman was, introducing himself as the world's strongest swordsman. Liz claimed to be the world's strongest thief. Klein was speechless with his teammates. When registering their team name, he whimsically chose a name that suggested no strength at all: Sighing Spirits, with a skull as their symbol. Although they were a heroic team, it sounded like they were villains. Naturally, everyone expressed their disapproval, but as soon as Klein mentioned he couldn't be motivated without this name, they quickly started flattering him endlessly. Klein took Tino to meet those 3 people, who couldn't believe he was the rumored level 8 Master of Disguise, a title given to the captain of the Sighing Spirits, a supreme honor for hunters. However, Gilbert didn't believe Klein's identity, questioning how he could be the strongest in the capital. This disbelief was fueled by the tall tales his 2 teammates spread. Gilbert outright refused to acknowledge Klein, who didn't force the issue. So, Klein let the matter drop with Gilbert and decided only the uncle and Luda would accompany Tino. Gilbert, unhappy with this, insisted on dueling Klein, stating he'd join them if he lost. Klein didn't want to bully the kid, mainly because he couldn't actually beat him, and let Tino step in. Before the fight, Tino showed off her flexibility to hint to Klein she could handle any position. Gilbert boasted that after defeating Tino, Klein would be next. Hearing Tino was also level 4 made him panic. However, Tino threw down her weapon, indicating she wouldn't harm Gilbert seriously. With a thief already at a disadvantage against a swordsman and Tino fighting barehanded, Gilbert felt embarrassed and also dropped his sword. Tino, with tears in her eyes, pleaded with Klein that if she won, he had to take her for ice cream. Klein agreed, and Tino, excited for ice cream, launched the first attack. She missed with a punch, but followed up with a kick. Gilbert, determined, charged again, but was no match for Tino. She twisted his arm and demanded he never speak disrespectfully to the captain again, listing many demands. Annoyed, Gilbert tried to retaliate, but was immediately knocked down by a punch, while Tino continued to charm Klein, crediting him for her skills, though Klein had done nothing. The uncle and Luda had already recognized the strength of the footprints. Only Gilbert was reluctant to accept. He believed he was born to be a treasure hunter, having started sword training from a young age. He was diligent and talented, quickly arriving in the capital and forming a team with other hunters. He was convinced he was the strongest, yet unexpectedly lost to a young female thief. In a real battle, he might have already been dead. At this point, Klein, smiling, asked him if he left his team because the gap in strength with his comrades was too large. He shared that he had a similar experience, but his team didn't abandon anyone. Actually, it was his childhood friends who didn't abandon him. Gilbert misunderstood this to mean that Klein's strength was far superior to the other members of the Sighing Spirits, yet he hadn't abandoned them. Is this man that strong? Gilbert thought, sweating. Then, Klein merely kicked his sword, causing it to burst into fierce flames, an effect even Gilbert, the sword's owner, couldn't achieve. This, of course, was an effect created by Klein using a magical artifact. The basic substance composing this world is magical elements. The so-called treasure halls are high concentrations of magical elements, caused by ley lines and other factors. They are specific local alternate worlds manifested based on memories extracted from the world's roots. All nations are actively researching their principles, but so far, they haven't fully understood them. The White Wolf's Den is one of these treasure halls. Before the appearance of the treasure hall, there was a wolf-like magical creature called the Silver Moon Wolf here. Due to its valuable fur, It had been hunted to extinction. Later, when the treasure hall appeared, bloody wolf-like phantoms emerged inside. Eventually, Tino still set out with those 3 people. After they left, Klein remembered to check the information about the treasure hall. He wasn't interested in conquering treasure halls, only in the magical artifacts. He had spent a lot of money to collect various artifacts. Fortunately, the battle group was quite profitable, and Klein wasn't short of money. However, after use, artifacts needed recharging. Klein couldn't recharge them himself, so he went to find a member of the battle group. An uncle mentioned that recently, lone phantoms had appeared on the northern streets, already causing harm to merchant caravans. Currently, the 3rd Night Corps is assembling a punitive force. According to eyewitnesses, the phantoms are wolf-like, likely having escaped from the White Wolf's den. This indicates that the inside of the White Wolf's den might already be filled with phantoms. Klein immediately worried about the 4 people he had sent there to rescue others. He also heard that recently there were reports of the phantoms growing stronger in the White Wolf's tide, and it might need a change in level. Just a few days ago, a team went missing there, including a famous level 5 Lancer. Klein picked up the commission and looked at it closely. It was that very team. Even a level 5 was missing. Sending a group of level 3s and 4s would be a death sentence. Klein was completely panicked now, especially since Tino and the other 3 had formed a temporary team. After hearing about the mission, 2 members even thought this was the ultimate trial that would elevate Sighing Spirits to a top team, unaware that Klein was already sweating profusely. Adding to his worry, he realized a major problem. He had used Gilbert's Purgatory Sword to show off, but forgot to recharge it. Meanwhile, Tino and his group hadn't reached the treasure hall yet when they sensed an unusual presence. Anticipating this, Tino had his team write wills before departing. At this point, he had no choice but to tell his teammates that everything was within Klein's calculations. Klein had information on all hunters and treasure halls in the capital, and could predict actions and thoughts of even those he had never met. Knowing why Gilbert left his team was proof of this. The other 2 members couldn't help but follow Tino's reasoning, realizing that the Tavern incident was also part of this grand plan. Tino firmly believed that Lord Klein wouldn't casually assign them an impossible task. Unfortunately, Klein was about to disappoint them as he was in a state of panic, hoping only for their safe return. He decided to head to the treasure hall before them to stop them and went to his artifact collection house. However, Tino and his team encountered danger even before reaching the treasure hall, coming face to face with phantoms. Meanwhile, Klein was scrambling to find usable artifacts, packing a bag to set out. His assistant, seeing through everything but saying nothing, knew that the emergency card hanging around Klein's neck and the flying cloak he wore were unreliable. Klein had just left when the assistant remembered that he was carrying the Dark Wings of Night Sky, the defective product responsible for the missile incident, with 0 safety and no brakes, unable to float or be controlled. With Klein's unreliable gear, could he really save Tino and the others? Before they made a name for themselves, Klein and his team were often looked down upon. Covered in dirt and grime, a man came over to mock them. "You think you can take down the Cyclops?" Before he could finish, 2 young women hinted, "We have something nice to show you," revealing a huge goblin head, scaring the man. Back to the present, though they encountered phantoms, Tino's strength allowed them to defeat the enemy without injury. However, these monsters seemed too powerful for a level 3 treasure hall. During the fight, Gilbert realized the magic in his Purgatory Sword was depleted, and with no one to replenish it, Luda and the man suggested retreating. Tino disagreed, believing everything was part of Lord Klein's plan. He speculated that Klein had purposely drained the sword's magic to prevent Gilbert from over-relying on it. Near the treasure hall, they indeed found a group of monsters armed with weapons. Gilbert volunteered to lead the attack, focusing on those with bows or guns. Tino, as the leader, was responsible for everyone's safety. He organized the team, drawing the enemy's attention with the agile Luda, while Gilbert and the man ambushed from behind. Tino was determined not to use anyone as a shield. Unbeknownst to them, Klein was praying for at least Tino to survive, even if it meant using teammates as shields. Tino's plan was perfect. The team cooperated well, swiftly handling the first enemy. More enemies appeared, and Gilbert and the man rushed forward. Tino, observing their movements, saw their potential. The man's experience complemented the team well, and Luda, though not stand out, excelled at scouting, allowing Tino to focus on fighting. The battle went smoothly. making Tino admire his leader even more. Gilbert almost lost his composure, remembering the rift with his former teammates, realizing they had tried their best. Fighting alongside his companions brought him joy. With the man's support, Gilbert could charge without worry, and soon the last monster was defeated. Entering the cave, Tino sensed a powerful force, likely the boss. They had remained unharmed, so Tino felt they could engage in battle. The usually cautious man wondered if joining this team was arranged by the leader, realizing that even hunters above level 4 who only tackle lower-level hauls could make a living. Perhaps the leader placed the man in the team to push his limits. Tino once again brainwashed the trio about how awesome Klein is. Luda couldn't help but ask, "Then why did he choose me?" Tino looked her over and concluded decisively, "Probably because you have large breasts." After saying this, he took the lead, walking ahead, ready to defeat the boss in one go. Meanwhile, Klein's cloak began to go out of control, crashing directly into the entrance at the mountaintop. Tino and the others were already confronting the boss. The enemy's strength and speed were incomparable to the previous minions. However, Tino saw this as a trial given by their leader and was determined to overcome it. The others also bravely charged forward. Gilbert blocked a strike first, and the uncle took the opportunity to attack but was thrown back, breaking his sword. Fortunately, Tino swiftly climbed onto the enemy's body and stabbed at its neck. That's how the boss was defeated, but Tino's leg was also slashed. She used a healing potion on herself. Although it was not smooth, they eventually won. Now they just needed to rescue the people. Tino even lent her sword to the uncle. But the next second, an attack flew out from inside, and several identical monsters emerged. Everyone was exhausted and had no strength for a second round. They had no choice but to escape. Tino directed the others to the nearest right passage. Just as she finished speaking, one of the enemies blocked the passage. Nevertheless, Gilbert and the uncle willingly created an opportunity for Tino and Luda, the more agile ones, to break through the encirclement, at least avoiding a total wipeout. Luda, with Klein's image in her mind, had a sudden inspiration and declared that she would not let anyone sacrifice themselves. Then she asked others to cover for her. Gilbert rushed forward to attract the enemy's attention while the uncle stabbed the white wolf's thigh. Luda distracted it with darts. Tino targeted the white wolf's eye with her pinky, releasing an attack. A burst of blinding white light followed, blinding the wolf. Gilbert felt they should strike then, but was thrown against a wall. This action completely enraged the enemy. Just when it seemed over, a human missile charged in. It was the out-of-control Klein. Seeing him, the white wolves backed off in fear, except for one reckless one that only managed to break a barrier. Klein was unharmed, shook his cape dramatically, and boasted, "I have 17 lives." He aimed at the white wolf and released a dazzling light. However, the light cannon looked more impressive than it was powerful. At this point, forget about rescuing anyone. Klein just wanted to go home. He pulled off a mysterious bottle hanging around his neck, drank from it, then threw it into the air, exploding it. As the white wolves were distracted, everyone fled on Klein's signal. This natural consideration by Klein reminded Tino of the first time she met him when he fiercely defended her from a group wanting to sell her. Since that day, the sighing spirit became Tino's admiration and the leader, a god among gods. After creating some distance, they rested for a bit. Luda told Klein how well Tino had performed. Feeling guilty, Klein praised her. Tino, acting as if nothing had happened, suddenly winced in pain when Klein noticed her wound. He then thoroughly healed her, still relying on his treasure. Klein led them forward, not knowing where to go. Where is this place? Where is the exit? How important is it to have a teammate who can guess the leader's intentions in a team? Although Klein saved Tino and the others, they were in a maze. How could the weak Klein possibly know the direction? He wanted to give Tino a hint, but when he turned around, the others looked back too, making Klein think Tino disliked him. While he was agonizing over whether to kneel and apologize, Gilbert suddenly asked the critical question, "Is this the way to the exit?" Klein internally complained, "Of course I'm heading towards the exit, but I'm not sure if it's the right way." Fortunately, Tino covered for him, telling Gilbert that guessing the leader's intention was also part of the training. In fact, they were not heading towards the exit at all since Tino had already seen the cave's layout. This path could never lead to the exit. To reach the exit, they had to turn back to the boss room. Klein then realized that the white wolves they had seen earlier were the bosses. However, he chose to continue forward, keeping silent about the others' doubts. At the crossroad, he unhesitatingly turned left, while Tino and the others stopped, suddenly realizing the leader's plan, and quickly followed. Only Klein was confused. The right path was where the missing hunters were, which Klein did not know beforehand. He even marveled at how useful the hunters' eyes were. The squad leader wanted to thank them. Tino credited all the merit to Klein, and now the others also deeply trusted Klein's abilities. The hunters had been missing for days, tired and hungry. Klein finally came into use by giving them a bunch of Snickers. While eating, they exchanged information. The hunters' average level was 5, and normally, the earlier white wolves should not have troubled them. In fact, they had encountered not white wolves, but small phantom creatures covered with bones, embodiments of resentment. The embodiment of resentment had just reached the boss room. The previously indomitable white wolves bowed down to it immediately. The hunters had no chance to fight back, and their strength could even match that of Qianjian, the strongest swordsman in the capital, who defeated all his enemies with a wooden sword and was also one of Klein's childhood friends, Luke. Knowing Luke's strength, Klein did not believe what the team leader was saying. Otherwise, Luke would have gone to cut it down. But it was clear that Tino probably couldn't handle it, and there was nothing to do but run. This time, with Tino as the leader, Klein left the decision to him. Sure enough, Tino and the leader thought alike, and everyone followed Tino towards the correct exit. Along the way, Tino kept brainwashing the new teammates about how strong Klein was. As long as Klein was there, they could definitely leave safely. But before they reached the exit, they heard several wolf howls. Klein quickly checked his treasure. Only 5 barriers were left, meaning 6 deaths would be real. He had no other treasures left. This time, it might really be over. However, as the embodiment of resentment approached, Klein still stood in front of Tino, ready to use the night sky dark wings as a human missile, intending to trade 1 for 1. Unexpectedly, as soon as the enemy appeared, they were so frightened that they couldn't move. How could we possibly beat such a thing? Even Tino looked terrified, and behind the phantom, another one appeared, just as everyone was starting to feel dread. But Klein was confused. The next second, he saw the second phantom kick the embodiment of resentment away. It was Klein's teammate Liz. Liz had even picked up the treasure sword Klein had dropped earlier. The two of them chatted as if no one else was around, leaving the others baffled. Realizing that no one recognized her, Liz got angry. How could anyone in the capital not recognize the sighing spirits? She thought. She was already sad not having seen Klein right away, and now she was treated this way, especially by Tino, her inept disciple who hadn't even managed to clean up properly. Tino's fear was almost tangible. Gilbert tried to intervene, but Liz punched him away, declaring it time to educate her disciple. Liz's barrage of questions left Tino utterly embarrassed, forcing him to continuously apologize and kneel down, crying for Liz's forgiveness. At the crucial moment, Klein stepped in, saying that Tino had worked hard, not only defeating the Phantom, but also completing the mission. Klein's praise somewhat appeased Liz. Hearing Tino compliment her restraint, Liz immediately smiled proudly. Gilbert remained silent. Thanks to Liz's sudden appearance, the crisis was effectively over. Just as Liz was enjoying the moment, a phantom that had seemed unimpressive came running over with its minions to cause trouble. Liz put her mask back on and faced a white wolf holding a machine gun, unfazed. The bullet stopped in midair before reaching her. Liz strode forward, grabbing the bullets in front of her. When everyone came to their senses, they saw Liz unharmed, scoffing at the notion that firearms could hit her. A weapon from a physically based civilization? Liz had long surpassed that. While lecturing Tino, she demonstrated how to deal with such phantoms, starting from the top, knock off the head, then kill with one move. For the leader holding a long sword, she disarmed him with bare hands, pulling the enemy close with a finger's force, before a knee strike sent him flying, then continued with a brutal beatdown, all while reminding Tino to work harder to narrow the gap between them. Klein was used to such scenes, as Liz and Luke had always sparred to strengthen the sighing spirits. Finally, the feared phantom dissipated without any dignity, and Liz, true to her nickname, the Absolute Shadow, settled into Klein's arms to be coddled after resolving everything. After returning to the base, Gilbert gave his Inferno sword to Klein as a thank you gift, and decided to start his training from scratch. determined to one day become as skilled as Liz. Hearing this, Tino kindly offered some advice. In fact, the masks worn by Liz and her team were custom made by Klein 6 years ago, but he forgot to make holes for the eyes. However, it seemed that no one really cared about this oversight. Back to the present, Klein appeared distraught, as if he had lost something. He decided to forget about it for the time being. The lost item was a slime that Sidor had entrusted to Klein a year ago. Although Sidor was not a high-level alchemist, she was affiliated with the Empire's academic institutions and was an indisputable brain trust of the sighing spirits. The fruits of her wisdom usually ended up in the hands of Klein, whom she trusted the most, supposedly for safekeeping. This time, Klein named the slime after Sidor. Just as he was about to check on it, Sidor stopped him, warning that releasing it could potentially destroy the capital. This made Klein break out in a cold sweat. Unfortunately, he had lost this dangerous slime. It turns out that it was inside the capsule he had brought to the White Wolf's den, intended as a last resort. When he opened it, it was empty. Klein dared not think about what would happen to the capital soon. Meanwhile, hunters noticed that the level of phantoms in the treasure vault had suddenly increased over a couple of weeks, prompting the association to send some hunters to investigate the anomaly. Klein was dispirited. The lady at the guard post told him that the association wanted details about the White Wolf's den. Klein directed them to Tino, who was currently being trained by Liz. Klein cautiously asked if there had been any news from the capital. The assistant immediately offered to investigate, but Klein quickly stopped him. Still, the assistant kept it in mind, as Klein had predicted many emergencies so far. It seemed that the capital was in for another change. Klein went to see Liz and Tino, only to find the captain of the Black Gold Cross team also waiting at the door, because Liz had taken over the training ground, preventing others from training. Klein carefully opened the door and saw Tino lying on the ground, half dead, with Liz looking down at him, asking why he hadn't stood up yet. Was this his limit? If so, then he might as well die. Liz was about to kick him when Klein called out to stop her. Liz was somewhat displeased, knowing that Tino might have better potential than her, but was not progressing due to lack of effort. Klein quickly appeased Liz, saying it seemed Tino had reached his limit and they should stop for the day. Surprised, Liz asked if he was stopping her. Klein confirmed with a smile. Liz immediately smiled back. However, although she decided to end the session, Tino was unwilling to stop and insisted on continuing the training. This time, even Klein couldn't save him. The captain of the Black Gold Literacy team also had to give up temporarily, as Klein's Spartan reputation was well known. Klein felt wronged and didn't want to speak. Then, the two discussed the blockade of the northern street, where several phantoms had appeared recently. The string of unusual phantom-related incidents suggested there might be a problem with the treasure hall. During such troublesome times, Klein particularly missed Yuck, who was not only strong, but also smart. With him around, these issues would be quickly resolved. Klein, who preferred to slack off, simply encouraged the captain of the Black Gold Cross to take on some assignments from the association. A team member, listening to their conversation, was confused and felt that this reputed leader wasn't as impressive as expected. The next second, the captain brainwashed him, advising him to look beyond the surface. Meanwhile, the vice president, looking at the abnormal reports, felt that Klein must know something and decided to ask him about it tomorrow. Who would have thought that behind all this, a mysterious force, the magic organization Sky Realm Tower, was at play? They were researching something capable of interfering with the vast energy flowing through the Earth's veins, leaving a force capable of altering the treasure hall on this land. If their experiment succeeded, they could freely create the treasure hall. Surprisingly, Klein had detected this secret base. However, these magicians were not panicking. As long as their teammate Sophia, who managed the defense system, returned, all problems would be solved. Of course, Klein knew nothing about this, but had a nightmare where the entire capital was engulfed in flames. He was really worried about the slime that had escaped. The next second, Liz crawled out of his bed, declaring she would give Tino a day off today and hoped Klein would accompany her. But before they could leave, the vice president came looking for them. Liz was very annoyed with these people, thinking they relied too much on Klein and should solve their own problems. She started fighting with the vice president right away, while Klein still felt like inviting the vice president's assistant upstairs for tea. The assistant took the opportunity to inquire about the White Wolf's den. Klein thought about it and said there seemed to be nothing unusual, but there was indeed something he was very concerned about, though he couldn't tell the assistant just yet. He certainly couldn't reveal that a slime capable of destroying the entire capital had escaped. So, he simply stated he would do his best to help on behalf of his combat team. His vague response only made the assistant more worried. Liz and the branch president were evenly matched in their fight. Surprisingly, the president, who usually works in an office, was quite strong. Liz criticized him for regressing too much, mocking him as he transformed into a Super Saiyan and continued to attack her with punches and kicks. However, Liz dodged all his forceful punches. The fight threatened to damage the entire house, prompting Klein to intervene and stop it. Liz immediately rushed to Klein's side, and the president had no choice but to give up and resolve to train more when he returned. When Klein's assistant returned, he found the place in disarray. Klein and Liz went out as planned. Liz enthusiastically shared her experiences in the city of Wanhui, where she encountered the strongest phantoms yet, truly worthy of level 8. The leader of the White Wolf's den paled in comparison, increasing Klein's worries. It seemed Sidor would not return soon. How could they resolve the situation before the slime caused trouble? Seeing Klein's worried expression, Liz asked what was wrong. Klein withheld some information and asked Liz what she would do if the capital were doomed. Without hesitation, Liz said she would escape with Klein and they could even visit the ocean. Liz's optimism eased Klein's worries. Suddenly, Liz seized a passerby she claimed had been watching them. Klein thought she was overreacting and let the man go, who then glared at them before quickly leaving. Liz still suspected Klein had other plans and deliberately ignored them. The escaping man was also panicked, not understanding why Klein let him go and unsure how much he had seen. Indeed, this man was a member of the magical organization. The Black Gold Cross actually listened to Klein and went to the association to take on a commission. The branch president asked them to investigate the White Wolf's den. Once inside, the team members realized they were tricked by Klein. The White Wolves had evolved into Red Wolves. Meanwhile, Klein took Liz to an alley in the capital's most dangerous area. Rumors said people had been disappearing recently, and Klein suspected the slime might be involved, so he wanted to check it out. There was also a new ice cream shop nearby, which he wanted to visit with Liz. Liz was excited to hear this, but a member of the magical organization observing from above panicked. Indeed, the ice cream shop was run by them. Now convinced Klein had intentionally let him escape to locate their base, the man prepared to close the shop quickly. However, their skilled member Sophia returned just then. As Klein and Liz arrived at the shop, they found it closed and were puzzled, but did not force their way in. Returning home, they had neither eaten ice cream nor found the slime, increasing Klein's worries. He asked again when Sidor would return, as they were counting on her, but Liz indicated it might not be soon. Just then, Klein's assistant reported on the association's commission to investigate the White Wolf's den. Black Gold Cross members had already entered, and more people were to be selected. The assistant had prepared a list of investigators, including experts in relics. Klein thought there should be no problem. At the same time, the magical organization held a major meeting. They debated why Klein knew of their existence and why he ignored them. They couldn't grasp Klein's intentions, not knowing he had none. Sophia suggested direct combat, stating their Tower of the Void are seekers of truth, and they wouldn't back down, law or no law, against any opponent, especially since the enemy was a group of high-level hunters. This would test her defense systems, and Sophia was confident in her abilities. The sage also agreed to let Sophia proceed. Meanwhile, Tino had been enduring Liz's rigorous training recently. After each session, he kindly tossed her into a medicinal bath, leaving him without a single scar despite the hellish training. Arriving at the association and seeing so many people, he learned that the combat group planned to collaborate with the association to raid the White Wolf's den. Klein had initially planned to send Yak, but since Yak was not around, he had to summon many people. Tino was also puzzled. Could the White Wolf's den be of a higher level than their last visit? Klein arrived and was also confused by the large turnout. The assistant explained that Mr. Yake was Klein's first choice, indicating that the mission's difficulty was certainly high. With Yake absent, more backup personnel had to be selected. Klein was speechless. He had casually mentioned Yake for the task, because Yake was a good-natured person who always completed tasks with a smile. Moreover, sending so many people would pose a big problem with funding. Therefore, he suggested cutting the number of people in half. Upon hearing this, the staff panicked, worried about sending only half the team into such a dangerous situation. Klein also became anxious, but when the assistant mentioned that the funding issue was resolved, and considering the slime Sidori was still missing, possibly hiding in the White Wolf's den, Klein let them proceed. Unexpectedly, Liz jumped in, claiming she could handle it alone, and mocked the hunters for their lack of progress. However, Klein disagreed with Liz going, mainly because there were too many people, and he feared she might cause trouble. Others thought the team leader would lead them, causing Klein to sweat profusely. He had no choice but to agree, but mentioned he had other matters to attend to and would meet up with them later, leaving the command to Black Gold Cross. Thus, the investigation team set off enthusiastically. Klein planned to arrive leisurely after everything was settled. After the meeting, Liz started making a fuss. Klein quickly calmed her down, saying there were other tasks he needed her help with. When people from the investigation team asked Klein if there was anything to watch out for, he warned them to be cautious if they saw anything resembling a slime, though he wasn't sure if it would appear. If it did, it wouldn't be an ordinary slime. Meanwhile, the magical organization in the White Wolf's den was furious about the large-scale force being sent in. The sage was also angry. They were studying a crystal, a device for mixing magical elements, which was extremely powerful. Since the enemies were intent on a confrontation, they were ready to crush them head-on. Sophia reassured her teammates that her defense system was designed to repel top teams. Besides, in the capital, only 3 individuals from the Sighing Spirits were present: Klein, Liz, and the detestable alchemist Sidori. Sophia had spies from the Tower of the Void everywhere, and thus had plenty of information on Klein and Liz. Although both had their weaknesses, Sidori was quite capable. Sophia even called her a nemesis. Both were researchers, and Sidori had been investigating the research based on papers left in the Empire by Sophia's mentor. Thus, Sophia was determined to eliminate Sidori during this opportunity, and the sage sensed her determination and handed over command of the battle to Sophia. On the other side, the Black Gold Cross squad had been investigating for a long time without finding anything unusual, which led to complaints among the team members. They felt that such a low-level treasure haul didn't require their intervention at all. It was as if they were merely cleaning up after their leader. The captain smiled silently, then suddenly received a message. He instructed the team to head outside and blew a whistle to call out the others. Everyone gathered to wait for the main investigation force. The captain also relayed Klein's warning to everyone: be cautious of slimes. The squad's troublemaker couldn't believe it. They were experienced hunters, yet they were being warned about slimes? The captain didn't explain directly, but shared an anecdote instead. Klein had once suggested everyone go flower viewing while armed, and that flower viewing spot had since turned into a treasure haul. During their visit, the place had transformed instantly, as if hell had appeared on Earth. Since then, everyone believed Klein had the ability to foresee events, so his intelligence couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, Klein was unaware of his perceived prowess and was deliberating when to depart. He had planned to show up after everything was nearly over, but Liz kept pestering him about when they would go. At that moment, Sidori, whom Klein had been thinking about day and night, returned with a bad premonition. She warned that their enemy was very powerful and needed to be defeated before gaining strength. Clearly referencing the organization, Klein, however, thought she meant the slimes. He quickly updated her about the slime's escape. To his surprise, Sidori considered the slime merely a failed experiment and had modified it to not attack her or Klein. Klein's relief was short-lived as Sidori continued her inspection. Even if the slime had escaped the capsule, it shouldn't have been able to leave the space phase-shifted vault. It seemed it had escaped when the vault was opened, following its instinct towards moisture and escaping through the bathroom drainage. Sidori was confident she could handle the situation, but she had another matter requiring Klein's assistance. Back with Black Gold Cross, the captain gathered everyone for a strategy meeting. He asked if anyone had faced a slime directly. No one had, as typical slimes were easily squashed, and no one specifically targeted them. They didn't know how to proceed cautiously. Klein had only mentioned that this was no ordinary slime. The captain was clueless. At this point, the troublemaker man stood up, feeling discussing slimes was a waste of time. He urged the team to focus on investigating the White Wolf's den. The others looked at him as if he was foolish, but since he was eager to take the lead, they let him do so. Frustrated, the man stormed off towards the den. A redhead girl raised her hand and asked a question, identifying herself as an alchemist who worked with Sidori in the battle group's research lab. She then produced a potion made by Sidori that could kill slimes. This potion was 99% effective against any slime. With this potion in hand, the captain ordered the team to split into groups to explore the area while leaving some members on standby outside to maintain vigilance. After investigating for most of the day, they encountered only the strange illusions reported, but saw no slimes. The Troublemaker man became even more arrogant, accusing the captain of wasting time. He then ran off alone to relieve himself in a small grove, still criticizing Black Gold Cross as mere decoration, when he suddenly sensed something was off. Following the sound, he saw a huge white wolf illusion chained up with two magicians standing in front, mumbling their dissatisfaction with Sophia. Despite their reluctance, they prepared to inject magical elements into the illusion when a hunter suddenly attacked. The man quickly knocked one magician down and subdued the other, but not before being hit by a fire spell. The magicians thought this was another of Klein's arrangements. Annoyed, the Troublemaker man insisted it was all his own doing. Hearing that Klein was not present, one magician hastily injected the magical elements into the White Wolf's hands. The wolf's body rapidly mutated, melting into a slime-like substance that sought high concentrations of magical elements. Recognizing the danger, the man blew his whistle. Hearing this, the captain immediately instructed everyone to activate. The first to emerge from the woods was a teammate who confirmed the captain's warnings about the slime. Soon, a large mass of slime-like substance emerged from the forest, vaguely resembling a wolf. The lone researcher commented that he had never seen such a slime. Regardless, the captain took action, ordering an attack. However, neither arrows nor spells affected it. The captain then arranged for healers to treat the Troublemaker while inquiring about what had happened. He learned about the mysterious person who injected the wolf illusion, turning it into a slime. As the giant slime blocked all attacks, the captain took the potion from the researcher, used himself as bait to draw the slime away, and tried to trap it by applying the potion to the ground where the slime would land. Upon contact, the slime's body rapidly swelled but remained unharmed after deflating. The captain was taken aback. This thing really isn't a slime. He cursed Klein as an idiot. A teammate reminded him. Klein said it seemed like a slime, which means it's not actually a slime. Just at the critical moment, Sidori arrived and told everyone that it was a magical barrier. Klein had already handed command over to Sidori. Sidori immediately understood the situation, noting a huge magical force field around the white wolf illusion, which repelled attacks and neutralized magical power. Such a powerful illusion has never appeared even in level 8 treasure halls, Sidori remarked, intrigued by the phenomenon. She noticed that the illusion's body was dissolving, indicating that the magical elements forming the illusion were being forcibly converted into magic. While muttering, she approached the enemy. As she had the most magical elements among everyone present, she became the primary target of the illusion. But Sidori was unfazed. She threw a test tube at the enemy, then asked the Black Gold Cross captain to shoot it. The captain drew his bow and shot accurately, and surprisingly, the large illusion dissipated. It turned out that the test tube Sidori threw contained anti-magic steel. Then, the vice president also arrived. Sidori had already surmised the instigators behind this event and shared what she knew with the others. Only then did they learn about a mysterious organization called the Tower of the Empty Realm, which had been researching how to manipulate treasure chambers at will. The recent illusion was likely a byproduct of that research. The researcher girl suddenly interjected, "Does this mean there's some kind of device underground?" Sidori confirmed this. The device must be a key part of that great sage's research, so the other side is probably well prepared by now. To prevent similar events, they must get clues from the two captured magicians, because Sidori no longer had any anti-magic steel, and without combat ability, she easily became the pillar of the team. Only the captain reminded his team not to be led around by that guy, because Sidori considered herself weak, believing any actions she took were justified, and she was no less formidable than any other member of the Black Gold Cross. Klein had not yet made his move when the enemy had already started to fight among themselves. This was because Sophia had them deploy the demonized illusions one by one onto the battlefield. Wasn't this just like letting the hunters defeat them individually? Members of the magician organization were naturally unwilling. Thus, they ignored Sophia's orders and released all the illusions at once. On the other side, Sidor and his team were interrogating 2 captured members, offering their lives in exchange for the location of the Great Sage. The 2 refused to talk. Sidor stated he had already been investigating the Tower of the Sky Realm and was aware of their activities. Seeing that they still wouldn't speak, he prepared to administer a truth serum. This potion was illegal, and government officials quickly intervened to stop it. The branch president of the association also disagreed. Sidor quickly explained it was just dye water and even tasted it himself to prove it. Just then, a loud explosion was heard outside. Everyone went out to see, and it was the same type of illusion again. This time, more than one. But Sidor had run out of anti-magic steel and had to rely on the hunters' collective effort to defeat the enemy. Sidor first had the shield bearers and vanguards face the attacks to assess the strength and direction of the forces. The shields were to be withdrawn immediately upon contact. The soldiers complied, but when a slime's fist hit the shield, it was blown away. Sidor then had the sorcerers restrain the enemy while he closely observed. He instructed the sorcerers to concentrate their attack spells at one point continuously to see if it could penetrate the opponent. However, this required a high degree of precision. Before the sorcerers could do so, another illusion emerged from the woods. Many hunters and soldiers were already wounded. Swain suggested a retreat. Sidor was annoyed, mocking the stupidity inside the Tower of the Sky Realm, then ordered everyone to retreat. Unexpectedly, after they stopped attacking, the 2 illusions started fighting each other. Sidor was not surprised, having speculated that the illusions' attacks on the hunters might be an instinct to replenish consumed magical elements. Soon, other illusions also began to fight amongst themselves. The captured members were shocked, unaware of this weakness in the demonized illusions. Researcher Talia was puzzled why the enemy had not deployed them one at a time. Her words echoed Sophia's initial orders, and with a face almost identical to Sophia's, suspicions began to arise. On the other side, members of the Tower of the Sky Realm, who had released all the illusions on their own initiative, were being scolded by the Great Sage. Now that the demonizing potion was used up, their operation had completely failed. Apart from the Great Sage, Sophia was also mocking them from afar. The Great Sage asked what to do next. Sophia told them that the situation had changed, and now the branch president had come to the front line. Without any demonizing potion, if they continued to fight, it would only be more disadvantageous. However, they couldn't just retreat, as it would disgrace the Great Sage in the Tower of the Sky Realm. Moreover, they still had hostages held by the enemy. Therefore, Sophia suggested striking first, using the malicious devourer to suppress the situation, and then playing their trump card to resolve all enemies at once. The Great Sage agreed, but the malicious devourer was still under training. Someone needed to be sent to command it. Meanwhile, at the camp, Sophia watched Sidor, who was deeply engrossed in his research, with mixed feelings. She admired Sidor for his talent and his willingness to undertake dangerous and difficult experiments. Sophia saw him as a role model, yet she also felt a tinge of envy because she could not be like him. While thinking this, she ran into Swain. Swain was curious why the 2 captives kept staring at Sophia, who didn't know herself. The branch president also approached Sidor, telling her not to worry too much, as the objective of this operation was just to investigate. If the enemy was indeed from the Tower of the Sky Realm, it wasn't something that could be resolved by their exploration association alone. The next second, Sidor mentioned that he had roughly pinpointed the enemy's location. After integrating the information and clues, he speculated that the enemy's base was likely near this cliff. He deliberately mentioned this in front of the captives, and their reactions confirmed his guess. With this information, they could strike first. Hearing they were going to attack, the captives became even more anxious and urged Sophia to untie them quickly. Sidor knew Sophia well, as she was his arch-enemy. However, Sidor didn't think he would lose, even if it meant staking his reputation to imprison them in the Great Jail. On another front, Klein and Tino had already met up with Liz. Just ahead was the White Wolf's den. Tino took the opportunity to try holding Klein's hand, earning a stern glare from Liz. While they were arguing, Klein activated his treasure, the Owl Eye, to clear the path ahead. Sidor and his group were also headed towards that cliff. The spiky-haired old brother, previously disdainful, now greatly admired Klein and was eager to meet him. Meanwhile, Sidor, ever the mindless supporter, stated that strength was only one aspect of Klein's abilities. Just then, a huge thunderbolt struck, signaling the arrival of Flick in the new illusion, the malicious devourer. The recent thunderbolt was the high-level attack spell, Devastating Thunderbolt. He used it to prove his strength was on par with Sophia. However, Sidor mocked him, knowing they had captives, yet daring to use area magic. Struck by the devastating thunderbolt, she seemed unharmed. Sidor then pulled out a small pistol and shot at Swain. The fully revived Swain immediately drew his sword and charged at the enemy. The branch president arrived just in time, turning the situation around. At the Tower of the Sky Realm's base, silence fell again. Why didn't Flick listen? Sophia had told him to bring all of the malicious devourers. Why did he bring only one? From the beginning until now, their plans had all been unsuccessful. The members speculated perhaps it was a versatile arrangement from the start. Now that they were destined to lose, the disciples suggested the Great Sage leave first. But the Great Sage refused to retreat. They still had their trump card and Sophia. They would abandon this place after a complete defeat. Meanwhile, Sidor and his group had reached the entrance, guarded by two phantom beasts. Breaking through them was necessary to enter deeper into the cave. The branch president stepped forward, suggesting they go ahead while the mage provided cover, then join forces to defeat the enemy. Was the final battle about to begin? The Great Sage pressed a switch, and the statue at the cave entrance exploded. This was the culmination of their research at the Tower of the Sky Realm, named Sky Realm. As the battle intensified, even the wounded wanted to rush to the front line. But there were non-combatants present, like researcher Talia. Unnoticed, two captives were quietly sawing through their ropes. Just then, a light cannon shot at the malicious devourer in the air, and the next moment, the huge eagle phantom turned into Liz. Seeing Liz boosted their morale, unaware that Klein and Tino were still left in the forest, and the two captives had also escaped into the forest. Although Tino heard some noises, Klein said not to worry, thinking small animals in the forest were normal. This confused the captives. Thus, Klein continued following Tino. Liz had easily changed the situation, but the giant golem was indeed tough. Liz's kick left it unharmed. Then a mark on the golem's head flashed twice, and it repelled the branch president with a sword strike. The branch president swung his giant axe, but the golem leapt away to evade. Landing, Liz had already teleported behind it. Yet the golem could also attack from a distance, grazing Liz's waist with fire. She had to retreat temporarily to gain distance. Sidor stood calmly, observing the situation. The enemy was durable. Liz's speedy attacks couldn't break it. Liz was frustrated and teleported in front of the golem, kicking and punching it. The branch president immediately cooperated and struck one of the golem's legs. Unexpectedly, the golem floated up again. Suddenly, Liz stopped her attack because she noticed Klein had finally appeared. Everyone's attention shifted to Klein. Liz complained that the golem was too tough and she couldn't resolve it quickly. Sidor smiled knowingly, suggesting it was over. The next second, the golem suddenly activated and flew towards Klein. Tino immediately stood in front of Klein to protect him, but in a flash, the golem seemed to be repelled, crashing into the wall and becoming completely immobile. Everyone was shocked by the scene, not understanding how Klein managed it, especially since Klein was also curious, having done nothing. When people went to check the cave, they found that the people from the Tower of the Sky Realm had indeed left. The most discussed topic was what exactly happened with the golem last night. Now that the crisis was over, Liz was busy getting a massage from Tino. Klein, unaware of what had happened, told Sidor that if any organization needed help, they could ask him. Sidor said she needed to resolve some matters herself, and looked towards Talia. Meanwhile, two escaped members of the Tower of the Sky Realm reported back that Sophia had infiltrated their squadron. They were certain they had seen Talia, unsure of her plans. Although the Grand Sage was puzzled by Klein, he decided to let Sophia proceed, believing that as long as they continued to uphold the truth, they would eventually prevail. Afterwards, the branch president called Klein and others to report the situation. But Klein had no idea what to report, so they were told to ask Sidori. However, the government officials felt guilty towards Sidori and were still hesitant to face her. 3 years ago, there was a severe incident known as the Great Prison Mass Escape, where dangerous criminals escaped and are still unaccounted for. All indirect evidence pointed to Sidori as the mastermind behind it. Although she was cleared of suspicion with the help of investigators based on the available evidence, Sidori was still the only person capable of committing the crime. Meanwhile, Talia was taken back by the people of the Tower of the Sky Realm, but she appeared scared, unlike Sophia. The Grand Sage sensed something was wrong. Then, the malicious devourer emerged and showed hostility towards Talia, confirming for the Grand Sage that the girl in front of him was not Sophia. The next second, the real Sophia appeared, looking exactly like Talia. Sophia told the Grand Sage that it was not that Talia looked like her, but that she looked like Talia. Then she removed her disguise and revealed she was actually Sidori, who had been Sophia from the beginning. Sidori had approached the Grand Sage only attracted by his capabilities. Plus, he had expensive equipment and rare materials that perfectly met Sidori's research needs. However, now that the mixing device has been developed, Sidori no longer intends to associate with them. She feels that Klein has been sparing these people all along, just to remind her that it might be time to turn back. Although she hasn't revealed anything to Brother Klein, he has seen through everything. Klein is a gentle person. He was prepared during Sidori's absence and gave her the opportunity to test her research on high-level hunters. By the time Klein showed up, the test was nearly complete. Sidori let the Golem fly away to wrap things up. They will now seize all research results from the Tower of the Sky Realm, and these members will be arrested as criminals. However, the research will still continue. Sidori assured them to be at ease. The Grand Sage has fully understood. This woman is indeed terrifying. Then Sidori approached Talia, directly frightening her to tears. But Sidori didn't care. From today onwards, the Grand Sage would inherit the name of extreme viciousness. These people naturally would not surrender without a fight. The Grand Sage raised his staff and released a flame of ruin towards Sidori, but she was unharmed because she still held the Sidori slime. Unlike the magical illusions, this slime absorbs surrounding magical elements and magic to grow until it devours everything in the world. The disciples, loyal to the Grand Sage, urged their master to leave while they stayed behind to cover his retreat. However, the Grand Sage was repelled back to the door only to see a robust humanoid creature, and Sidori had appeared behind him at some point. Sidori always knew she was weak, so she had to gain power early. The most efficient way was to create a synthetic beast, which required the best materials. Thus, she simply released the extremely vicious prisoners from the Great Prison and collected them to create this minor killer. Now even the Grand Sage is about to die by its hand. The surviving members of the Tower of the Sky Realm have all lost their memories. The synthetic beast and the Golem have been seized. Klein speculates joyfully that perhaps those people conducted some strange experiments that led to their own demise. Sidori says that the seized research materials will one day be returned from the Relic Research Institute. He hopes the Space Golem and Malicious Devourer can be taken over by their combat group. He then asked about Sidori's arch-enemy. Sidori said she had gone far away and would likely never appear again. The matter with the White Wolf's Den has been settled. Since Sidori previously expressed a desire for golems and Malice Devourers, Klein went to the division head to request them. Thinking the Malice Devourer was just a bottle of water, when asked by government officials what he planned to do with it, he replied without hesitation, "Drink it, of course." The division head and government staff were puzzled but respectful. Although they couldn't provide the golem, they did give him the Malice Devourer, which Sidori collected. Meanwhile, Klein was called away by the division head to be informed that a level 7 hunter, also a dragon slayer, had come to town. Klein was unfazed. After all, he was one too. The division head laughed heartily, mainly to remind Klein to avoid conflicts with the newcomer. After a hearty slap on the back, Klein's life was nearly ended by the slap. Just then, Klein noticed a poster on the wall about the upcoming annual Imperial auction, primarily featuring treasures. The treasures brought to the capital at this time were far superior in both number and quality. Relying on these treasures in battle, Klein couldn't afford to miss it. However, he was currently short on funds. Borrowing from Sidor was an option, though he still hadn't repaid previous loans. As he was pondering this, the division head's niece came over to greet him and asked what was on his mind. Klein casually mentioned the Dragon Slayer hunter, not taking him seriously. Sidor returned with the Malice Devourer, which had shrunk in size. She had already trained it not to attack her or Klein, so it was quite affectionate towards Klein, though a single swipe of its tail could end his life. Fortunately, Sidor quickly took the creature away. Looking at his nearly shattered protective ring, Klein realized he needed to replenish its magic soon. His usual teammate who helped with magic replenishment hadn't returned yet, but luckily, Sidor gave him a new ring. Elsewhere, the followers of the visiting Dragon Slayer were feeling disrespected by the locals and decided to demonstrate their strength. Unaware of this, Klein was enjoying a massage from Sidor. The assistant couldn't bear to watch. Sidor's massage, accompanied by sounds not fit for public ears, left Klein unresponsive as he was still concerned about replenishing the magic in his treasures. Many of his treasures were depleted of magic, and he hoped to recharge them all. Sidor, seizing an opportunity, called over all the mages in the battle group for intense training, promising them skills comparable to top mages if they completed the training. This sparked interest among the mages, even attracting 2 elves from another squad. All members of this squad are elves. Elves in this world not only live long, but also excel in magic. They naturally look down on anyone who isn't a skilled mage. Therefore, the formidable Klein is considered a novice in their eyes. Then, a female mage volunteered to join the training. Sidor brought out Klein's treasures for her to replenish with magic. Despite her efforts, she couldn't fully recharge them, and nearly exhausted all her magic filling just 1 ring. Sidor immediately handed her another ring. While the female mage was recharging, Sidor explained that a mage's total magic capacity largely determines their strength, and it typically grows until adolescence. The mages present were past their growth period. Mid-explanation, the female mage fainted from magic depletion, which presented an opportunity to increase her magic capacity. Recovery from depletion could increase magic limits by a few percent. Sidor's training involved pushing mages to their limits. Recovery takes time, so Sidor prepared potions. A few drops revived the female mage and successfully increased her magic capacity. The process was to be repeated to enhance abilities. Sidor mentioned that a team mage had grown stronger this way. The proud female elves were motivated by this challenge and had Sidor bring all the treasures. With so many treasures needing magic and free labor available, the other mages also joined the training. Klein was at a loss for words. After dealing with the treasures, Klein and Sidor went to see Liz, who was bathing at the time. Tino, her disciple, attended to them. Sidor began to stir trouble, asking Tino if he was often mistreated by Liz, and suggesting he join her for easier strength training. Tino, overwhelmed by Sidor's touch, became helpless and sought Klein's help. Hearing Liz call for a towel, he seized the chance to escape with it. Liz then ran out naked, causing Sidor to cover Klein's eyes and scold Liz for her shamelessness. This visit was to celebrate Liz and Sidor's return, and also included inviting Tino. The 4 went to a tavern for a feast. Liz, known for her appetite, was already drunk. Sidor, playing both friend and foe, fanned the flames. Klein, noticing her antics, switched their glasses. Aware the drink was spiked, Sidor had no choice but to drink it, getting drunk after 1 glass and starting to rant about Klein treating her like a wallet, borrowing a huge sum without repayment, suggesting she might have to repay with her body. Just as she was about to touch Klein, Liz pinned her to the ground. At that moment, some troublemakers suddenly appeared. Unexpectedly, they were Dragon Slayers from out of town demanding drinks and women. So, Liz, holding a drink, went over and poured it over a Dragon Slayer's head. As he was about to react angrily, she firmly stepped on him. The local hunters cheered loudly. Klein could only step forward, apologize, and then hurriedly pulled Liz away. The squad, known as the Mist Thunder Dragon, entered the city with high spirits, but soon ended up in this sorry state. Such is the irony of fate. Who would have thought that the receptionist at the Explorers Association had tried out for the initial team 3 years ago? She was appreciated by Luke at the time but was ultimately eliminated. She then gave up on becoming a hunter and took a job as a receptionist instead. Meanwhile, Klein learned that the strong man they had upset was Arnold, whom the branch president had warned him about. Now there was no choice but to ask the branch president to mediate. It was said that this team had once hunted a thunder dragon. Klein couldn't help but reminisce how delicious the thunder dragon teriyaki was, and suddenly missed that taste. At this time, Arnold and his men were furious, outraged that someone dared tarnish the reputation of their missed thunder dragon. They decided to teach that woman a lesson, and immediately headed to the Explorers Association to inquire about Liz's name. Before the receptionist could speak, the branch president provided the answer and inadvertently exposed Klein, mentioning he had already warned Arnold about the situation, although it seemed Arnold had completely forgotten. Upon hearing it was an 8th-level master of disguise, Arnold's men's expressions changed. The branch president seized the opportunity to remind these outsiders that as long as they behaved themselves, the master of disguise would likely not target Liz again. He then mentioned that Klein had a request for them since the meat of the thunder dragon made excellent teriyaki. He hoped Arnold's group could hunt one for him. This comment was seen as an insult, pulling all resentment towards Klein, who was oblivious to this and was busy calculating his debt to Sidor, which had nearly reached 10 billion. Sidor gave him 3 options. She could go to prison, which was not acceptable. She could marry Klein and share the debts as marital property, or Klein could marry into Sidor's family. Essentially, the choices all involved marriage. However, Klein wanted to try paying off some of the debt himself first. His assistant suggested he could also sneak into the treasure temple, though Klein felt this was akin to sending him to his death. The assistant repeatedly warned him not to incur more debt. Meanwhile, a royal auction was approaching, and it was unlikely Klein could avoid spending. At the same time, Arnold's men were gathering information on the Master of Disguise. This man was mysterious and extremely powerful. Despite their efforts, they learned little useful information, only that Klein had made the treasure temple appear in front of everyone, and had blasted a huge golem away merely with his aura. Arnold believed these were exaggerations, and could not believe Klein was truly an 8th-level fighter. Lacking specific combat information, he suspected Klein lacked corresponding combat skills, and let his companions fight for him. Convinced of this, Arnold decided he would personally defeat the rumored Master of Disguise. Klein was still troubled by his billions in debt, and went to the balcony to clear his mind. Just then, Tino happened to be passing by below and jumped up to join him. Klein shared his worries with Tino. Unfortunately, Tino didn't have that much money either. However, when Tino heard Klein might marry Sidor as a last resort, he was shocked but didn't dwell on it, and instead took Tino to have some desserts. On the way, Tino had a sudden idea and suggested that Klein could also explore the treasure temple for valuable treasures to sell at the auction for a good price. As Klein's most loyal follower, Tino was willing to go in his place but didn't know where to find such treasures. At that moment, they ran into Arnold and his group, reminding Klein of the group Liz had beaten up in the tavern. Seeing their hostile demeanor, Klein knew they were looking for trouble. Klein was willing to humble himself, even to the point of kneeling, but Tino wouldn't have it and defended Klein, drawing their ire back to him. With no choice left, Klein had to face the challenge, though none of his fighting team was around. Distracted, he accidentally caught the eye of one of Arnold's men, making him even more mysterious in their eyes. However, Arnold still believed Klein lacked real strength and had ascended by luck and his companion's efforts. Unable to refute, Klein stayed silent, but Tino couldn't stand others insulting his beloved leader and stepped forward to show them what he could do. Klein stepped back, letting Tino take the stage, which surprised Tino, who wasn't expecting to actually fight. But having spoken boldly, Tino had to face the challenge. Arnold, despite being thrashed by Liz, was a legitimate level 7 and toyed with Tino like playing with a cat. Klein, initially distracted, was reminded by Tino to cheer for her, but Tino was no match for Arnold and was quickly subdued. The uninteresting fight angered Arnold even more, feeling underestimated by Klein, who had even claimed he could have beaten him. At this point, Klein had no choice but to reveal his treasure, posing while declaring he didn't actually want to fight. As he spoke, his treasure emitted a rainbow light, filled with magic by his wizard teammate, designed to suppress higher-level hunters without harming bystanders. Arnold felt as if thousands of pounds weighed him down, unable to stand and questioning what Klein was up to. Klein explained it was gravity magic, Tyrant's power, a seemingly original technique. Arnold assumed it was Klein's creation, which Klein didn't deny. After helping Tino up, Klein told Arnold that if he still wanted to fight, he should proceed systematically. Klein's team had 3 main squads, and only after Arnold had defeated those would he consider facing him. After talking, Klein took Tino to a dessert shop to enjoy some pastries. However, Tino felt embarrassed by his recent performance and wanted to regain his reputation. He asked Klein about the location of the treasure temple where high-value treasures could be found, promising to help Klein pay off his 10-digit debt. Klein didn't rely on Tino, though, and only mentioned a level 1 treasure temple's location. Meanwhile, Sidor and Liz also heard about Arnold bothering Klein, but decided not to intervene. Klein went to have tea with the counter lady, hoping she could pass a message to Arnold, saying, "I will remember your issue until I forget it." Curious, the counter lady asked what Arnold, a level 7, looked like in Klein's eyes, who thought for a moment and described him as a big and serious person who disliked Liz for being too young, probably preferring busty women. She also inquired why Klein had eliminated her initially. Klein didn't answer directly but hinted she should have noticed earlier and said she would pass now, although she probably didn't intend to rejoin the fighting team, as many hunters were looking forward to seeing her. Encouraged by Klein's words, she didn't realize the real reason was that she had been under 15 years old, ineligible for the fighting team. The next day, the counter lady conveyed Klein's message, but the order was clearly problematic. She put Klein's intended message last, first saying that grilled dragon meat wasn't as tasty as grilled chicken, so Arnold and his crew needn't hunt dragons. Arnold, increasingly angry but unable to stop listening, asked her what else Klein had said. Embarrassed, she relayed that Klein said he liked busty women. Arnold didn't hear clearly and asked her to speak louder, making the entire association hear. Poor Arnold had to fight for his reputation and began discussing strategies with his men, also sending others to gather information on the 3 squads. However, they found that the squads were busy and unwilling to fight. Frustrated, Arnold's men came up with a new idea. There was an upcoming large auction where they could procure new equipment and possibly sell an item previously rejected for appraisal. On the other side, Klein and Tino also went to an appraisal place to have a trinket Tino found in a level 1 treasure shop assessed. The elderly appraiser, after examining it, suspected it was a foreign treasure, different from the typical items found in the treasure temple, possibly a high-level magical device. However, without activating it, its effects were unknown. He asked them to leave it there since an auction was coming up, and he had many treasures to appraise. In fact, scoping out potential items before the auction was Klein's real purpose for coming, and he specifically brought Tino because the old appraiser enjoyed chatting with him, which allowed Klein some leniency. The old man always thinks of his grandson when he sees Tino, so he constantly reminds her to take care of her health, not to overexert herself, and to seek help from her companions or Klein if needed, as he has been the hunter with the most advancement in recent years. Whenever Klein is mentioned, Tino can't stop talking, but she becomes increasingly disheartened by the contrast between her modest self and the formidable team leader. Klein then finds a mask similar to a transformational artifact he once used, but Liz had damaged the original. Buying this new one would allow him to move freely without a guard and visit the dessert shop whenever he wishes. Klein immediately inquires about the consignor of the item to see if a direct deal can be made before the auction. However, Klein is penniless and heavily in debt, wondering where he could find the funds to purchase this artifact, especially as Sidor, who has been busy with costly research, has little money left. Tino laments that a good price for the bracelet they took for appraisal would help, but if the artifact is truly valuable, Klein would likely want to keep it himself. He considers other sources for funds and spots a carriage from the Gladys family, known for their disdain for hunters. Surprisingly, the family's young lady is seen leaving the base of the Footprint battle group, personally escorted by Yake. Despite her family's views, she seems interested in Yake, but changes her expression upon seeing Klein and Tino. Yak introduces them, and after a few sarcastic remarks from the young lady, Klein remains smiling and silent, explaining his lowly background and lack of manners as reasons to avoid speaking, which confuses her. After parting with Yak, Klein sees him as an easy target for borrowing money, but Yak knows him too well and refuses. Klein then seeks loans from other team members. Everyone in the battle group is aware that Klein is desperate for a certain artifact, indicating its significant value. Upon hearing this, Sidor does not hesitate to sacrifice her research progress to gather a substantial amount for Klein, knowing how crucial the artifact is for him. They could even confront the artifact's owner if necessary. Unbeknownst to them, the owner is Arnold, who, knowing Klein's interest, prepares for a hefty price. Despite their ignorance of the artifact's effects, Arnold is determined not to sell it cheap. As Klein's keen interest suggests, he understands its potential value. He repeatedly asked about the effects of Klein's artifact. Klein only mentioned that the artifact was somewhat dangerous, and its use was restricted in this country. He advised Arnold to sell it quickly. However, when asked why he wanted it so much, Klein couldn't answer. His poor acting made Arnold suspect that it might be a deliberate ploy to make them keep the mask. If the mask was indeed very dangerous, and Klein knew this, he planned to retrieve it before it could be auctioned. When he realized the owners were them, he immediately changed his strategy to overtly encourage them to sell, ensuring they wouldn't want to sell the mask at all. Arnold, thinking he had uncovered a conspiracy, did not hesitate to offer 10 million. Klein was shocked by the figure, as their initial lowest estimate was 30 million. However, as both parties prepared to trade, other members of the battle group arrived, outbidding each other to get the mask. Then, the young lady of a noble family appeared and directly offered 100 million. It seemed Klein could no longer get the artifact, as its fame had grown immensely. The commotion also attracted other nobles' interest, and it was decided to place the mask in an auction, giving Klein some time to raise funds. Unexpectedly, Sidor appeared and solved his urgent need with 8 billion from her savings and Klein's marriage fund. Klein was conflicted, knowing that accepting this would likely mean he had to marry Sidor to repay the debt. He went to the terrace to calm down, but Sidor suggested investigating the young lady's reasons for wanting the artifact, possibly persuading her to give up. Unexpectedly, the lady wanted to buy the artifact for Yake because she believed Klein's rise to level 8 was due to an artifact's power. She wanted Yake to surpass Klein. Klein honestly explained that a person does not become the strongest just because of an artifact. Without it, the strong remain strong, and the weak remain weak. He meant Yak was strong without an artifact, and he was weak even with one. Unfortunately, the lady misunderstood. At a critical moment, Sidor stepped up, stating their budget was 2 billion, advising the lady to give up, as that was their limit. If the lady could prepare more, they would concede. The lady immediately relayed this to her father. The adults, thinking deeper, suspected Sidor's claim of 2 billion was a bluff. Considering their opponent's unpredictability, even 10 billion might not be enough. Concerned about family honor, the Earl was ready to use all his savings to ensure his daughter got the mask. The auction day finally arrived. After much effort, Klein and his team raised 950 million as their budget, yet their chances of winning were only about 70%. However, Sidor and Liz had other tricks up their sleeves. The two started to get jealous and compete for attention, which Klein repeatedly declined. Although he really wanted to change his face, he preferred not to escalate the situation. He decided it was okay to give up if they couldn't win the bid. At the entrance of the auction venue, to his surprise, everyone was there. They had all heard about Klein's debts incurred for bidding on a treasure. Klein gave an awkward smile and asked Tino why she came alone. Tino, feeling dejected, said she hadn't received an invitation from Lord Klein. The others around began to murmur. To appease Tino, Klein decided to let her bid in his place. Thrilled at the thought of making a grand appearance, Tino immediately agreed. Just then, the Count's daughter stepped down from her carriage, lifting her head haughtily upon seeing Klein. All those interested in bidding had gathered because of Klein's influence, causing the mask he was interested in to be scheduled for later. So initially, Klein and his group were idle as their budget was limited and they couldn't afford to waste money on other treasures. Klein watched desperately as one beloved treasure after another was auctioned off. Klein was itching to act, even considering using his backup plan, but then he thought better of it as it wasn't an emergency. He managed to overcome his desires. However, the next item was a pair of boots that could levitate 1 centimeter above the ground. Though seemingly useless, everyone eagerly raised their hands to bid. Klein was on the verge of breakdown, questioning why he wasn't a tycoon, while Tino kept looking back at him, seemingly urging him to give a signal. Then came a crystal ball with a 70% chance of predicting the weather. Klein almost signaled, but suddenly remembered that no matter what, if he bid on other treasures, Sidor would never forgive him. However, in the next second, Klein stood up, ready to show everyone the true extent of his audacity, his readiness to borrow money from childhood friends to splurge on treasures. However, the next item brought up for auction was not a treasure, but a metal golem crafted by a magical organization. Sidor's eyes widened in surprise. It was the Sky Realm golem she had wanted, but the government refused to provide. Although Sidor desired the golem, she knew Klein was more interested in a mask and decided not to bid. Despite the golem being like a relic of a companion to her, created with immense time and cost, she insisted they should not bid for it. Yet Klein stood up without hesitation and started the bidding at 300 million. Others were also interested in the golem, driving the price up. Klein kept instructing Tino to raise the bid, using mostly Sidor's funds. The price soon reached 500 million. Sidor tried to stop Klein, fearing he wouldn't have enough to buy the mask. Klein reassured her that it didn't matter, as his original intention was to buy the golem, which is why he had been raising funds. The bidding escalated to 830 million, close to their total budget of 950 million. Klein decided to bid it all, but unexpectedly someone else bid 990 million, surpassing their budget. Was the golem to slip through their fingers? Surprisingly, Klein signaled Tino again, and they secured the golem for 1.06 billion. Klein used his reserve funds, giving Sidor the check to quickly pay for and collect the golem. Now, Sidor owed Klein money. Funds that weren't even his, but rather a large portion of his sister's savings. Those who came with Tino from their combat group knew that Klein was the actual buyer. Having spent such a large sum, how could he afford the mask? Klein pretended it didn't matter, saying his goal was achieved and encouraged them to enjoy themselves while he left the auction alone in despair. Only outside did he remember that the Countess intended to give the mask to Yak. Why not buy it directly from Yak at a low price? Thus he immediately sought out Yake, urging him to visit the Countess, who indeed had won the mask. To avoid revealing his real intentions, Klein was deliberately vague, only mentioning that the mask was somewhat dangerous and that Yak might handle it well. There was still time to act. Yak agreed promptly and asked if he should bring weapons. Klein advised against it, adding that he would be upset if Yak missed the opportunity. With that, Yak headed to the Countess's estate. Meanwhile, the Countess sat dejectedly in her room alone. She had successfully bid for the treasure, yet her father still said she had lost because Klein had left the auction early. He had raised more than 200 million, and they spent 200 million on the mask, only to understand its intricate dimensions. The Count believed Klein had intentionally allowed them to win the mask at a low price as a favor. The Countess nearly broke down upon realizing this. How could she present such an item to Yake? As she wallowed in her dismay, the mask suddenly began to speak and extended numerous tendrils, attempting to attach to her face. At that moment, she understood why Klein had warned that the mask was somewhat dangerous. Outside, Yak and his group met with the Count and learned the Countess had been hiding in her room. Confused as it seemed there was no issue, Yak wondered why Klein had sent him. Suddenly, noises came from the room. Yak and his men rushed there, only to see the Countess wearing the mask, throwing guards out as if her personality had been altered by the mask. Yak approached her, and the Countess momentarily regained some sanity, telling him the mask was the strongest treasure purchased for him. Yak gently comforted and thanked her, urging her to remove the mask and hand it over. As she prepared to do so, she noticed the sword Yake was wearing and questioned why he brought such a thing. Remembering Klein's words, Yake instantly regretted not listening. The Countess became enraged again, and they were forced to subdue her by force. Meanwhile, Sidor and Liz went to find the adventurers from out of town, planning to collect a kickback from them. They weren't just taking. Sidor offered to sell them an antidote for 110 million. A bargain considering they had spent much at the tavern. With their men falling ill, the leader tearfully agreed. After handling the situation at the Countess's estate, Yake returned disheveled to his group. He found Klein had decorated the office and was wearing a clown nose, kneeling to apologize profusely. From Yake's appearance, Klein knew he must have upset the Countess. After apologizing, Klein eagerly took the mask from Yake. Despite the mask speaking again, Klein did not hesitate to try it on himself. However, after detecting his attributes, the mask found them all to be of the lowest level, with a total score of just 3, insufficient to activate the transformation it was designed for. It forcibly detached from Klein, leaving him disappointed. After all the effort, it turned out not to be the transformation mask he hoped for. Although he decided to keep it, realizing even the Countess could activate it, suggested he was even less capable than her.